Welcome to Klahanie. Today, instead of some special aspect of life outdoors filmed in a particular location, we have a film to celebrate one of man's eternal pursuits, walking. Our film celebrates the everlasting pleasure of just plain walking. Not walking as a hardship or a stern discipline, but as a simple, natural pleasure. It happens that this film was written and filmed in the Vancouver area, but it could have been done almost anywhere. The theme is timeless and it's universal, because man changes a lot less than he sometimes imagines. Our guest today is Dave Brock. He's a man who has a knack of showing us new ways of seeing things that we sometimes come to take for granted. He and photographer Doug McKay made this film essay on walking.
Even when you're indoors and you're up against a worrying problem, every healthy instinct tells you to get up and pace the room. It's called quarterdecking, and the human function has to be pretty general to have a technical name of its own. But I need hardly explain to the Klahanie audience, who know the very word Klahanie means the open air, that walking naturally in natural places can offer more scope than do the patterns of a rug. To our cousins, the apes, walking seems the most unnatural thing we do, even when we walk on turf or in the woods and turn our steps halfway back to nature again. To our brothers, those other apes who are seated all day in offices and motor cars, walking seems inefficient. Compared with a horse, we may not be too efficient, and yet, I don't know. Human walking does so much more than covering mere distances. It is the strangest medicine known to us, for it has two opposite actions, either of which you can select at will. It can help you to think, solving your problems as you trudge along, or it can help you not to think, forgetting those same problems. So that the same walk can be either a stimulant or a sedative, whichever you deliberately choose it to be. Quite often, our forgotten psychological needs correspond to our neglected physical ones, and this is very true of walking. Apart from the huge physical benefits and the joys of walking, we have an unconscious need to do what our race has always done since it stood upright. We neglect these needs at our peril. Our denial of such things is the cause of most troubles today, of our own dehumanization, including our denial of our need for beauty. We've paralyzed our sense of beauty. The walker, above all men, can regain that old knack. For the walker finds himself noticing things in two ways impossible to the motorist, apart from the fact that he can reach places impossible to cars, and apart from the fact that he can hear things as well as see them better, hear them and smell them properly, and taste them and touch them, as well as seeing them so clearly he feels he's seeing them for the first time. The walker's two ways of noticing things are these. He sees details. He notices individual wildflowers or spots a single yew tree in a patch of pines, but he also sees the whole picture in its right proportions and fittingly framed. And though all of us in Vancouver are lucky, only the walkers really know the place. And only the walkers know the details, so that the man walking becomes the cousin or brother of everything around. The walker feels part of the seasons also. He is their cousin or brother too. And by vertical wandering up Vancouver's North Shore hills, the walker can vary his seasons considerably. Yes, and only by vertical wandering can you now find that rarest of modern treats, a drink of really pure water, free of chemicals and yet unpolluted. And the air up here has a quality of its own. Belloc says, "Some weather is intolerable if you're doing anything else but walking. Walking in all weathers, you're doing something native to yourself and going the best way you can go. All men have felt this." And he's right. The walker feels so many things that all men have felt. The mountain meadow begins to believe perhaps it really is July after all. There are mountain kinds of conifer not found where we live near sea level. But even in the more familiar forest down by the shore, the walker learns to notice, which is a trick he may have forgotten since his childhood. He becomes part of all three kingdoms, not only animal, but mineral and vegetable as well. And to him, the meanest flower that blows can bring thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. He even becomes aware of his own feet. And imperfect though human feet are, and still evolving, his improve as he walks, though he walks for pleasure only and not mere dull fitness. Nor need he feel superior and exclusive, though some walkers do, God help them. The best motive is merely to discover the world, for to admire and for to see, for to behold this world so wide. It never done no good to me, but I can't drop it if I tried. He can read a page or two and then walk on and think about what he has read. Never read without reflecting. Yes, and he can retrace his steps for a second look at anything, a double take. You can tell Wild Bill Shakespeare was a walker, for he found poems in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. And the wilder Billy Blake, since he could see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower. Debussy was proud to hear overtones in the waves, but I wonder if all solitary walkers on the shore do not perhaps hear the overtones without consciously knowing it. They learn to listen not only on Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. William Blake asked, "How do we know that every bird that cleaves the airy way is not a vast world closed by our senses five?" And why confine this question to birds alone? But at least the five senses of the walker continually expand, and so do his five wits. Your five wits, as you may have heard, are common sense, imagination, fantasy, memory, and judging values. Bless thy five wits, as Edgar says to Lear. Walkers with even 2 or 3 wits choose to walk as much as they can inside the city too. And in the city lanes they find not only decay, but flowers growing wild, and 100 other details, none of them majestic, certainly, but not uniformly dull either. In the alleys, where you get away a little from the traffic noises and the human traffic, you start to hear individual sounds living lives of their own. Now and then you notice those who are evading predators and other parasites. Maybe the walker himself is a visual parasite, and yet how could he be? For he leaves each scene as rich as he found it. Rich in variety, with scarcely one object that is truly just average. They say that if anything fails to astonish you, you're looking at it wrong. To walk on Fraser River sand for a change, with or without a trace of gold in it, and to do this beneath a wider sky than we have in town under the hills. These things, by the way, are soothing rather than astonishing, surely. But what's so wrong with being soothed? There's not any too much of that these last few decades, and it's walkers mostly who know where to find it. Not that a river can't soothe and stimulate at the same time. If women can and certain wines, why not rivers? And one reason rivers are more soothing than the seacoast is that their edges are not so sad. Unless the weary walker's looking for a bridge or ford along some dreadful stretch that hasn't any. Dike walking along the riverbank under those same great broad skies we mentioned, skies from which there just may, with any luck, descend one of our remaining meadowlarks. Jericho Country Club, right in the city, used to be wild with meadowlarks, but not one is left now, where they once found life so gay. Every species draws the line somewhere and moves on if it can. Walkers, better than other men, get to know where the survivors are and how they're doing. The dreamiest walker can be aware of the latest news from nature and may tell you if poison ivy has reached the Georgia Strait yet, or where to find hairy manzanita at Point Atkinson. He knows, maybe, where otters still breed, and he's far more aware of the day-by-day encroachment of pollution of every sort. And why not, since he observes it at first hand? The walker compiles his own personal visual anthology, an anthology of the real world, good and bad. What a strange dreamer, then, to seek out reality above all things. Like the heron who seems hunched inside his own thoughts. He knows what Adlai Stevenson meant in saying, well, don't just do something, stand there. We spoke just now of the walker making his own personal visual anthology. He makes other things. He makes his own sane solitude when he needs one. As who does not on this crowded old slum of a planet? Mind you, the walker makes friends too, and makes them most readily of all men. But he makes privacy in which to call his soul his own. In fact, he makes his soul, if you'll allow so permanent a concept. Each has to do it alone, and yet few know how, but most walkers give it a good try. All except the grim ones and the conceited ones who are out to make records and to make mere brutal health through a kind of drudgery and to make a fuss. Walkers make the true acquaintance of their own city. Even in cities, walking is the most natural way of getting about and by far the best. Twice a day, it's even the fastest way. If you were making a written anthology of walking, surely you'd have to start it with Wordsworth, he who heard the still sad music of humanity. And surely you'd begin with his sonnet, "The world is too much with us." There's a wonderful book published in the late 60s by Simon & Schuster called The Magic of Walking. I'm sorry, it's only Wordsworth, his one weak snatch from Peter Bell, in spite of praising Wordsworth for being one of the greatest of walkers, which of course he was. And I'm bitterly sorry this splendid book completely ignores Hilaire Belloc, he of the great boots and the great staff, and all his great songs and essays and whole books of walking. But never mind, anthologists must be allowed their own reasons, since each collection on paper or in the mind is a portrait of the maker. And though this book doesn't pay its debts to Belloc and Wordsworth, we are still in its debt. For instance, a collection of tiny sayings of big effect, such as this from Emerson. "What attracts my attention shall have it." What a legitimate justifier that is. Or this, from G.M. Trevelyan, the historian. "I have two doctors, my left leg and my right." Now, he's been grateful, not smug, or so one hopes. Or again, in every photographer there is something of the stroller. Here's Anatole France. It is good to collect things, it is better to take walks. Anatole France implies, as we stated so explicitly, that the walker does collect something, though in the main he does it quite invisibly, leaving things unharmed. John Burroughs, the great naturalist, said to find new things, take the path you took yesterday. And Goethe, on a path not unlike John Burroughs, said everything has been thought of before, but the difficulty is to think of it again. And if that sounds glib or silly, then try thinking of it again. Here's Stevenson. I travel not to go anywhere, but to go. Thoreau is as familiar as Wordsworth now, well, more so at the moment. But his essay called simply Walking, familiar or not, is about the best thing in a good book. In this essay occurs his famous phrase, "In wildness is the preservation of the world." Thoreau, that good walker, had a certain wildness himself for his own preservation, but in this essay he's gentle when he praises the very few who have a real genius for sauntering. In Shakespeare's time, it was thought saunter came from La Sainte Terre, the Holy Land. Idle strollers would ask for money, pretending it was to help them reach the Holy Land on a pilgrimage. And the latest dictionaries now think there may be a crumb of truth in this romantic guess after all. In any event, Thoreau believed it and liked thinking of it. Thoreau said that the real geniuses of sauntering, and not just the mean vagabonds, may in some way be heading towards some kind of Holy Land at that. Mind you, there's nothing wrong with low vagabonds and beachcombers if you define them properly. In and around Beverly Hills, well-dressed walkers can be arrested as unnatural vagrants. What a planet. The book has an essay by Lin Yutang explaining there's no use in travel at all unless you're a bit of a vagabond seeking adventure. Lin Yutang is rough on those who roam to improve themselves or to have something to talk about afterwards. And to show slides, no doubt. He also hates those who stick to a plan and a timetable. He calls them all false travelers. And how he laughs at writers who have to go away to write a book when the mood and the material for it exist everywhere. And he says travel is useless without the gift of vision. But if you do have this gift, then you can get all the joys of travel very close to home. He admits several legitimate reasons for roaming the earth. He'd better. One good reason is to lose your identity for a while and get lost and unknown. Another is to revisit nature. We all know that. But he describes so lovingly the visits paid to squirrels and muskrats and gophers and clouds and trees. Well, read him. In fact, read the whole book, The Magic of Walking. In some collection more full of gaiety, there will one day appear this by Gillette Burgess. My feet, they haul me round the house and hoist me up the stairs. I only have to steer them and they take me everywheres. That's a nice attitude. And most of all, someone should collect all of Belloc on walking. Belloc lists some remarkable things that man does naturally, and along with speech, humor, affection, the sense of color and form, and honor and prayer, along with these great things, he lists walking, a thing that is consonant with your whole being. And what armchair critic can deny it?
Dave, I enjoyed your trip, your walking tour, your odyssey. Now, you mentioned a book several times, and you had great praise for it, and there's a number of quotations from it. We better tell people again just what the book is and where it can be got and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, it's called The Magic of Walking. It's by Aaron Sussman and Ruth Good. It's published by Simon & Schuster. I'd say about 1969. Whether it's still in print or not, I don't know, but it should be.
And it should be in the library.
Yeah, Magic of Walking.
I gathered from the film that you're mainly a solitary walker. You walk by yourself.
Yeah, not exclusively, Dave, not as a policy or anything. I like walking by myself. There's certain kinds of companions I don't really care for, you know, that want to comment on everything. Sometimes I feel a lot of things are spoilt by talk. Sometimes I think everything is spoilt by talk.
Should you walk with a wife, or is that a bad policy?
Well, with my wife, it's delightful. I think she walks almost too much, you know, in all weathers. But no, the people who notice more than you do, or who know more about nature than you do, and who know more about walking than you do, and who can actually teach you to walk better. I knew one man who combined all three. It was my own father. He was a geologist and a great woodsman, and he noticed everything. And he started training us when I was about 10, I guess, when he got home from World War I.
I guess there's a special knack to be able to not talk too much,
Yeah.
and still help you to see.
Yeah, well, when he paused or when we rested, and he wouldn't let us rest long. He had a special gait, you know, like an Indian. A slight rolling gait, and he tended to put his feet straight in front of him rather than out to one side. He didn't land on his heels. Well, there were a million tricks that were quite familiar, but we didn't know anything about that when we were small.
Dave, where's the best place in the world for walking that you've ever walked? Not the best place, but the place you've walked.
Yes.
It's the nicest place to walk.
That's easy. The South Downs in Sussex, well, they spread beyond Sussex, but I've only walked in Sussex. It's short turf, beautiful to walk on, nice rolling hills, and to a Canadian, it's really exciting. You find you're walking not only among, but on violets and primroses and wild daffodils, all of them growing wild. It's incredible to us. Of course, we have our own wildflowers too, but and the air off the English Channel. Maybe it's all changed now. This was way back in the 30s. It couldn't all have changed. I can easily tell you the worst walk I ever had, Dave. I was about 10 years old, and a friend and I took a bulldog for a walk. We didn't know bulldogs can't walk. And when we hadn't gone very many miles, she lay down and began to whimper. And we had to carry her all the way home. She was an enormous bulldog. We had to carry her upside down like a baby. And she whimpered part of the way home, and then we whimpered the rest of the way home.
An upside-down bulldog
That was part of
is
it.
an image to conjure with. Dave, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, I liked it. Thank you.
Our guest, of course, has been Dave Brock. That's Klahanie for this week. Thanks for being with us.